Mr. Donskis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indeed, the annual report on human rights and democracy in the world 2011 and the European Union's policy on the matter is immensely important for me, and I do believe that this is a high point, one of the high points in my life. And of course, it's very important to mobilize and probably to consolidate all the possibilities and opportunities concerning collegiality of my friends, my peers, my colleagues from the European Parliament in terms of shadows, in terms of my predecessors, Madam Andrikiene and Mr. Richard Howard. So I will be very, very happy and very much look forward to consult them, because I do believe that no report is deemed to be perfect and no report is going to be complete in terms of a huge territory, immense territory, which it's supposed to cover. But in any case, I think that every rapporteur has a right, a choice, an opportunity to offer her or his focus and understanding and a vision. And this is why I do believe that a more systematic approach is applied here to avoid a sort of Christmas tree effect in terms of offering some toys or gifts or beautiful phrases. And instead, let me assure you that the report is quite sharp and focused, because my ambition and my objective is to provide a human rights policy shaping document rather than a sort of overview of the past. And Madam Chair, you quite rightly noticed that it's very important that the 2011 EU annual report is an attempt to get back to the normal practice when we have everything done on time. And I'm really delighted, and I welcome the adoption of the EU annual report on human rights and democracy in 2011. And of course, we welcome the fact that the Vice President of the Commission, High Representative, was able to present the annual report in the June plenary of the Parliament and thereby return to the normal practice. I do believe that the report will greatly benefit from your suggestions, from your amendments, and needless to say, I ask and I plea to do your utmost to help me achieve the phase and the shape that I need to have for this report. In the beginning, I would like to tell you something about the structure of this report and about some emphases that I'm trying to provide. The structure is, I think, quite predictable, because there are some general considerations, then EU action in the United Nations. Then there is a part titled EU Policy on International Criminal Justice and the Fight Against Impunity. And I have to say that the emphasis is put, and this has been done with very much attempt and quite on purpose. For instance, there is an emphasis that we regret that selective justice frequently manifests itself in new and transitional democracies under the guise of the rule of law and war on corruption. That we regret that selective justice has become little more than a means to seek political revenge and to settle accounts with political dissenters by intimidating and marginalizing opposition, especially in the run-up to elections. We, of course, underline an utmost importance of the Arab Spring, which is, I think, one of the threats of this report. There is a part or a section titled EU Action in International Humanitarian Law. And of course, crucially important is a section, as I mentioned, Madam Chair, on the European neighborhood policy and the Arab Spring. At the same time, what is very important, that some emphasis which I'm trying to provide is on regrets that we could express that the Eastern Partnership policy at times remains open to misinterpretations, becoming rather a policy of all permissiveness and forgiveness, and of double standards that are frequently applied with regard to the Eastern partner countries. A section on EU policies to support democratization and elections, of course, is one of those that we can predict. Human rights dialogues and consultations with third countries is one more section. Then EU sanctions and the human rights and democracy clauses in EU agreements is one more, a necessary section. And I would like to draw your attention, dear colleagues, to this section, which is pivotally important for my group, for ALDE, which is freedom of expression, social media, digital freedoms. I think that I would be I would be more or less correct in saying that this is one of the pivotal, one of the crucial emphases of my group, which very strongly coincides with my own emphasis. And again, there is a very strong emphasis on the Arab Spring concerning social media and digital freedom. Then, if you kindly allow me to say something which is my individual passion and my individual vision, this is the section on EU support to civil society and human rights defenders. It reflects my views and core principles, and small wonder that, for instance, it offers one of formulations, namely that the report regrets that persecution and marginalization of human rights defenders remained a widespread tendency in China, Russia, and all other countries that still mistake high human rights standards for an imposition of the EU, the UN, and global human rights organizations. Regrets that disbarred lawyers in China and politically persecuted journalists and media workers are regarded as an internal affair. And Madam Chair, I am going to be quite strong and quite committed to this. I do believe that the protection of human rights defenders worldwide is one of the missions of the European Parliament and the Subcommittee on Human Rights, and I do believe that you would expect something like this in my report, because I feel very strongly about our mission, our duty to protect dissidents, dissenters, dissenting minds, human rights defenders and activists all over the world. And I'm coming to the final part of the report in terms of its structure and composition. This is EU action against the death penalty, and, of course, torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. If you kindly allow me to draw your attention to something novel, something that I believe is novel and more or less original, this is my emphasis, that the report regrets that the political abuse of psychiatry still remains a painful problem in a number of countries, including Russia, which have a history of using violent psychiatric methods in support of anti-democratic regimes, trying to intimidate and stop dissenting segments of society and individuals. Emphasizes with concern that this tendency goes hand in hand with vague and elusive forms of torture, including psychological terror and degrading conditions of prison. And discrimination of societal groups. Dear colleagues, I would call for your attention, and I would call on you asking for amendments to boost this section. I realize that societal groups is a formulation which cannot cover the territory. In fact, it is about LGBT, it is about human rights violations committed against people suffering from caste-based discrimination. And needless to say, trying to cover this territory, trying to include all people that are prosecuted, persecuted, and otherwise neglected or discriminated, it's very important to get more emphasis, more amendments. That's why discrimination of societal groups remains quite open to your suggestions. Women and children in armed conflict situations. Then I'm coming to women's rights. Rights of the child, which are absolutely indispensable parts of the report. And finally, I come to something which is, again, very important to me personally, freedom of religion or belief, something that needs our attention and work concerning all theistic, atheistic, non-theistic beliefs and freedom of conscience all over the world. I do believe this coincides with a strong feeling of my group concerning freedom of religion and belief and my own. And my final emphasis would be that we are concerned by the situation in China where individuals who practice their religion outside officially sanctioned channels, including Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Falun Gong practitioners, often face persecution. And therefore, we urge China to ratify the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, as it has promised, and so forth and so on. This is to say that some of these things are to be found in the report as more or less standard or conventional segments of such a report, of such a document. Others will reflect my own vision, my own understanding. And again, Madam Chair, let me sum it up by saying that I realize that this is the beginning of a very, very difficult work, and I'm quite open to my colleagues' suggestions, and I will be more than happy and more than grateful to receive them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Donskis. And now the floor is open for the colleagues to comment. I see here Mr. Tokic, the shadow of the report from the EPP. Are there others who want to take the floor? Then I will ask also then the EAS and then myself. So Mr. Tokic, please.
Tisztelt elnök asszony!
Madam Chairperson, I am speaking on behalf of the EPP, but I'm also coordinator and shadow rapporteur. And I'd like to thank in all of these capacities